Chris Trapani and Ryan Iwanaga have been partners in Christie's international real estate, Sereno, for almost all of their lives. They grew up together on the same street. They went to high school and college together, and now they are business partners. And that could sometimes be a recipe for disaster, but not with the two of them. And they talk about how they make their leadership team work and have some great suggestions on handling friction in your leadership team or your team in general. So enjoy the podcast. Chris and Ryan, welcome to the RealTrending podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much,
Thanks, Tracey. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So you guys have been in the news lately, at least real estate news. Christie's International Real Estate was obviously acquired by Compass. Yet your firm, the Sereno firm, wanted to stay independent. So tell me a little bit about, kind of walk me through your decision and what that entailed and where you are now.
Yeah. So thanks again for having us. This is awesome to be here. So I think that answer to that question goes back to 1976 when Ryan and I were 10. And, we were just, young kids living on Sobey Road in Saratoga, which at the time, was before Silicon Valley was what it is. It was a kind of a farming community. And, kind of met along the driveway and sparked a friendship from back then. But I think, we didn't always follow the straight path growing up. We were fairly rebellious. Ryan was a skateboarder, built a half pipe in his driveway. His dad didn't like very much. And I was a surfer growing up. So I think, part of what drew us to those sports was sort of that individuality, a way to express yourself kind of creatively, kind of counter to maybe, whatever else was going on. So I think we always had that rebel soul. Our dads wondered if we were ever going to be able to point that in a constructive direction. But somehow, kind of through the developments that we'll probably talk about here on this show, we were able to channel that in as agents, as managers, and in a other company that years before had acquired our original company, through some executive roles. And kind of the spirit of what launched Sereno was the very same spirit that Ryan and I sensed back in 1976. We were kids. And so the draw to that has been very powerful and organic and natural for us, all the way through, even though we had a wonderful partnership with App Properties. And, we cannot thank Thad Wong and Mike Golden enough. They're phenomenal leaders. They run an incredible operation. We learned a lot from them. But when this opportunity popped up, there's like the kind of emotions of like, oh my gosh, like I didn't really ponder that potential. There's kind of the mental part of wrapping your mind around it. But I think at the heart level, like the second that opportunity appeared, I think Ryan and I both knew that this is the direction that we needed to go.
Yeah. And, there's so many layers to the decision and to the experience that we've had at Sereno Group from, since 2006 when we founded it, even before then. And it really is kind of this lifelong personal journey. Somehow, just as fate would have it, we've always ended up either, roommates in college, or, we were actually next door neighbors growing up and shared driveways. Chris lived on a flag lot and our driveway split down the road. I had three sisters. It was me and three sisters, and there were four boys over at the Trapani's house. So I gravitated to being over there oftentimes, every day. And that kind of sprouted the kind of lifelong story that we've been telling. And so, and I think also it's important to say that both of our fathers were very entrepreneurial and independent. They worked for themselves and were able to create success and excel in the business world just on their own individual kind of spirit. And I think that was tremendously influential to both Chris and I. And so I think, when we started Sereno Group, it was us against the world type of mentality. And we had some ideas about what we wanted to create and, kind of presented with the opportunity to kind of go back to that independent spirit. I think initially we were like, oh, what does that mean? But we quickly became, we realized, I think individually and collectively, that it was the right thing to do. It was the most natural and authentic. And as Chris said, I mean, our partnership with that and Mike and the rest of the leadership team at that was tremendous. They've built an incredible brokerage, very smart business people, but also live from the heart, and have a wonderful spirit. And so we just really learned from them. And it was exciting to think that we could now kind of apply, the education and the learning that we've had over the last couple of years to try to rescale Christie, Sereno, and just see what we can come up with as independence again. So it made natural. It was a very easy decision. And we kind of jumped at that opportunity.
So I want to go back to the fact that you grew up together. You're kind of like the U2 of real estate instead of like the Black Crows, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
I guess I'm aging myself with those bands.
That's a great story. Yeah, they were all childhood friends. Yeah, of course. Great story.
Yeah. So, and that's interesting. Tell me about that relationship. I mean, because not a lot of people who were friends growing up can go into business together and for this long and really not just hate each other by the end of it.
That's a great question. That's awesome.
Yeah. So Ryan, I want to start with you and then we'll go to Chris.
Yeah. Okay. So, it's funny because it just sort of naturally happened that way, and I do think a lot has to do with family influence and sort of, we always bring up the fact that we're fourth generation Santa Clara County people, right? Community and the cultural community was very important to each of our families. We had strong mothers and very strong fathers. And so there was a lot of similarities, right? Chris had grown up in San Jose and then moved into Saratoga. I had grown up in San Jose and Campbell and kind of moved into Saratoga. And we sort of found ourselves out in the country. That's when Soapy Road was country. And so just by virtue of kind of being out there and being next door neighbors, we gravitated to each other. I think when people ask me like, how has it been able to last as long? I think, the family influence, like I talked about, I think ultimately we both want the same thing. Oftentimes where people are very, the first thing they realize is that we're definitely different personalities, right? We're the yin and yang, where Chris is very, he's introverted, but he's extroverted and very social. I'm kind of a social introvert where I love people, but I also, kind of like behind the scenes a little bit more. And so the energy balances out. I can tell you that it's probably taken a lot of patience and forgiveness. And there have been times when, things aren't working, but I think after a lifelong relationship and sort of being best friends for so long, ultimately that's kind of what always prevails. I think the business is never that important to where it jeopardizes the relationship. Right. And I think that's where that value system comes along. I personally, I can tell you that one of the biggest breaks that I ever had was, Chris got into real estate right away and he was able to really work hard and build a successful real estate career. I kind of did graduate school. I walked this completely different path. And then I realized that I just wanted to start working. I think just by nature, real estate can be very competitive. And I remember calling Chris. I was a doctorate student, I was working on my PhD many lives ago, but I called him and I said, I'm thinking about getting into residential real estate. And he could have very easily just said, okay, well, good luck. But what he said was, come back home, get your license and work under me and I'll teach you the business. And then you can go out on your own when you're ready. And, that was a huge difference. Like that made all the difference in my life and my family, and it's impacted me. And it was a good lesson for me to learn coming in about kind of the generosity and the opportunity that I can create if I ever got to a certain position. And so that influence, it works that way, where you kind of just recognize, the journey is kind of we've done together, and we've both contributed to our lives in a positive way. So that always kind of prevails. Yeah.
Chris, what about you? What's your take on
Yeah,
that?
that's awesome. No, he said, Ryan shared some great stuff. I was just sitting here thinking, next July, ironically, is Sereno's 20th anniversary, but it's also the 50th anniversary of the summer that I met Ryan.
That's true.
I hadn't actually thought about that. It's really interesting. And so as Ryan's speaking, I get little chills now thinking about it. I mean, if I really take a step back, I have to believe there's some, you call it providence or, divine intervention or whatever it might be. There definitely is some kind of, in my mind, kind of, if I really think about it, there's got to be some higher power that kind of gravitated us together on that little country road. And that somehow, even though we've kind of done different things along the way, high school together, Cal Poly, Ryan went off to grad school and all that, really, it keeps bringing us back together again, right? Over that time. And yeah, I mean, as Ryan said, we figured out Ryan's process oriented and I'm results oriented, right? And so, when you're kind of, it's almost like a marriage, you get married, you don't know all these things about the other person. And a lot of times we're not ever really able to unpack what's actually causing the tension. Like it's hard to, unless you really do the work, you don't really know, what those drivers are. So to be super transparent here for the listeners, we kind of figured that, boy, after all those years, there was a point where we had a ton of tension, we were always able to kind of manage through it, but we cared enough about the relationship because truthfully, Ryan's my brother. I mean, I have 3 brothers, but Ryan is my 4th brother. And so we actually hired a professional, and we literally hired this incredible therapist, and we had like sessions. We had like enough sessions, just we unpacked stuff and we just said what we needed to say. And, I remember kind of like at the end of the 6th session, it was like, okay, well, Ryan, do you have anything else? No. Chris, do you have anything else? No. It was kind of like, okay. And then we kind of just, went back to work. I will say, I think that was incredibly healthy and helpful because since that time, I think for me personally, I gained an understanding of kind of how Ryan's feelings and the way he thinks and kind of what matters to him. And so, even though I can't really change myself, I can actually be aware of my actions and what I'm doing or how I'm communicating and how that might have an impact on him. Right. And so if that's kind of built into that, I think it's given us more momentum as a result of that.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, it's about self-awareness and also, getting help when you felt like you needed help. And I love the relationship. That's wonderful.
And I can't, the driver to go see the therapist, it was more about the personal relationship than the business, right? And the business was so mixed in with the personal, but really, I think both of us just wanted to get through it. So it was really important.
That's great.
Yeah, it's one of those like the marriage where the people showed up after 45 years, said, "Hey, we actually do still want to be together. We don't, we just want to figure out how to manage that togetherness, right?"
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So, Chris, tell me, I want to kind of get back to the business a little bit and find out, dig a little deeper. What advantages do you really see staying locally owned rather than being part of a larger corporate structure?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And so probably a lot of us or listeners have been, banked at a community bank, right? Where people know your name and you walk in and there's a relationship there, right? And that I think does still matter to people as much as technologies come and, all the things that have changed there. I think at the end of the day, that is still a draw. And so when you get into residential real estate, I mean, this is a when I say uniquely personalized relational business, that probably doesn't really do it justice, right? I mean, the way that real estate agents interact with clients is at the most personal level, going through the most, transformative life changes and decisions and things. And so kind of the nature of that relationship, I think, is synonymous with the relationship agents have with their brokerage and the owners and the leaders, right? And so that was our experience as agents in the first company we were with in the early 90s. And, look, we knew it. We knew we were in it with the owners. They were all in. They were local people. They had sold real estate in the Bay Area, and so there was just a sense of community pride and really feeling like you had a voice in that mix, right? And then there was some big acquisitions, and we kind of experienced a different environment where it was definitely more of a business-minded culture, and that's fine. We learned a lot from that, and you can definitely achieve results. And there's a lot of great companies that I think tend to have more of those type of cultures. But yet, there are some limitations back to, again, where local decision making. Okay, all these markets are very different, and we learned that in a prior company a few iterations ago. And so having really the hyper local knowledge, the local decision making to be able to make those decisions on the fly. I mean, those kind of things really matter to real estate agents, right? The business is very dynamic. And so, things are moving very quickly. And so all I could say is, having been an agent, manager, owner, been in a big merger and then back out again, is I know for me, my level of engagement, it was almost like the moment that we knew we were doing this, like all of a sudden it just activated. It was like, not that I wasn't into what we were doing, but I was managing a lot of other dynamics that I think some that were at the detriment of kind of some of the benefits I'm talking about. So that activation of all of a sudden being like, wow, this is ours again. And we're going to put all of our heart and focus on that.
So Ryan, let's talk about priorities. Obviously, brokerages, brokerage growth is difficult right now. The market's slow. There's commission compression, compression on gross margins. It's just been a difficult market overall, especially with the settlements and the uncertainty of all of that. So what are some of your priorities, and how are you getting creative to grow moving forward?
Well, we've always been a culturally centered organization, right? And I think first of all, what our approach is that obviously we're paying attention to expenses, right? I think what we've learned from our experience with that properties is that they were very, very skilled in creating systems infrastructure, and really kind of understanding where all the company dollar went and what it was for and where it was supporting the company. And we've always been aware of that, but, we were really focused on culture at first, and we always have been. And so really moving forward, I think our strategy is to really kind of some of the things that Chris said about having agents more engaged with the idea of being an independent broker. I think what we're doing now is we're focused on balancing the two, that we can have a culturally rich environment, but also be very mindful of the back end infrastructure and our systems that we put in place to manage the company with a little bit more, I think, pragmatism, right? And understanding kind of where the levers are that we need to execute on and maximize, and how that impacts culture. And how we can use that as a tool to enhance culture. It's having a culturally rich environment. It's a little bit it's a nebulous thing. There's not a definition. It's just a feeling that people have when they come into the organization. And I think that that's still attractive to agents. And so our hope is that our move to independence kind of gives agents a choice, right? That I think if it's very homogenous and it's all corporatized and there's, these nationally kind of national brokerages, I think agents always want a choice, and it's okay. They could choose to be at I have best friends that are at other brokerages, and whatever works for them is great. That's the beauty of the business. But we've always seen ourselves as kind of the opportunity or the alternative to that. And I think kind of going back to Chris's question, I think the localness of the brokerage matters. I think one of the founding premises that we had as a brokerage is that really residential real estate is I think just by the way that business is done, it's really meant to be a mom and pop business, right? Where you have people from the community, who sell in the community, live in the community. We're an arm's length distance away from decisions and the client and the agent. And I think those things matter to agents, and I think they'll continue to matter, even though there's all of these kind of changes and restrictions, and it's getting more challenging to run a brokerage. But at the same time, I think if we focus on building culture through smart business, that it will be attractive to agents and will continue to attract good talent and good people. So.
Yeah, and I want to talk to Chris about attracting talent, because it sounds like that's what you're really focused on based on your culture rather than recruiting per se, finding the people who fit the best with what you're trying to do. So Chris, tell me a little bit about your recruiting strategy, and do you recruit to like a boutique brand? You tell me a little bit more about what you're doing.
No, that's great. It's awesome. And so I think really what we have here is we've got really the best of both. And so, Sereno, like a lot of real estate brokerages, that's a made up name, right? Ryan and I made, along with a group of agents. And so, but Sereno's kind of the heart and soul of the company. It's the DNA. It's the thing that retains agents. It's the thing that draws agents in, right? Christie's is this tier one global luxury brand that you could transport into basically any market and people know what it is. And so that's kind of the opportunity we think that we bring, is we have this, hey, you can get this really personalized brokerage, highly dynamic, hyper local leadership, and focus, decision making, and you also have this luxury brand that spans the globe, right? And so it's been really awesome to see a couple things. One, a number of our agents before we took the company back have really leveraged the Christie's brand. I mean, one of our agents in Incline Village, Christine Perry, has gone up there and really, really, literally made a splash in the market, sold the highest property ever, highest sale price on the lake in Incline last year, is very highly publicized, for $62 million. Went and sold another one on the buy side that was listed at $44 million. So here's someone that was an original founder of the company out of the original 27, that's been with us the entire time, that now also took that brand and leveraged it out there. So that's the draw we think really that we have. And it's been very interesting internally. When we started the company and we were signing these personal guarantees on these leases, of course, on the most fearful day, I wondered, how are we going to ever fill these buildings with good people, right? Well, it turns out 27 people grew to 650 people. And so, fast forward to, we had to make this decision to take back the company very quickly. We couldn't go talk to 600 people, say, and take a poll. We couldn't do that. But the moment the news came out that, hey, this big transaction's happening, we're not part of that. And by the way, we're taking the company back, people went nuts. They were so happy. I mean, we were overwhelmed and humbled, and just, it was so affirming that not only our people, but we're getting message. I got calls from broker owners that used to own their companies and people that are leading major companies around the country, just like, wow, that's amazing. It's incredible. So that's kind of that, momentum now that we're building on, and that's drawing in some agents, of course, some that we've already recruited in the first couple of weeks that are being, hitting the news wires now as well. So again, it's just kind of like building upon that, what I just talked about, and gaining that momentum back again. And we're off to a really good start.
Yeah, I would assume that uncertainty that comes with an acquisition became certainty once you kind of put your plan out there for your agents. And, I could imagine they would be happy just because of the idea of just not knowing what's next with a acquisition. So,
well, they have direct to us now. Again, now they can, not that they didn't, but now they're like, oh, we get these guys again. We can,
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It's pretty awesome.
So I want to shift to technology. Obviously, more and more brokerages are adopting AI, and it's really reshaping the industry. So from a brokerage perspective, what key innovations do you feel like brokerages need to be looking at or adopting? And are you actively looking at some of those efficiencies in the back office or marketing wise?
Yeah, so I think, yes, we are looking at them. The whole world seems, especially being here in Silicon Valley, the whole world seems to be about AI. Most people think they know what AI is about and kind of where the future is going, but no one really knows. And I think the one thing that we've learned, especially, having the tech center of the world be in our backyard, is that whatever you think is relevant today is not going to be relevant tomorrow. And I think in particular with AI, there's this evolution that is happening probably faster than people could actually kind of understand. It seems to be in the news cycle locally here almost every day. And so we are looking at that. I'm a little bit more, it's so early on with AI that I'm interested. I've done some personal research. I've been talking with different AI companies just on a personal level, just to try to educate myself and kind of look at the future. And there's a lot of really interesting and exciting stuff that's going on. There's, contract AI, there's legal AI, there's all these sorts of things that can be applied to real estate practice. I do think that where the technology will have the most impact is, I always talk about when I got into the business in 97, the flyers, I would take my photos, I would take my own photos, I would take it to 1 hour development, and then I'd get a glue stick and I'd glue it onto the flyer that I made. And that there wasn't any printers, it was all just sort of, DIY. And, there was no internet, I didn't have a cell phone, nothing like that. And now, I think when I broke it down, just in the very minimum, there's anywhere from 30 to 40 steps. When you take a listing to getting it to market, it grows more complex on the daily. And I think agents tend to do it themselves, right? Every good agent that I know has really wants to be in control of every step. And that's what makes them good. And I think what AI can do in our business is somehow alleviate some of those box checking tasks, right? And sort of streamline it. I have yet to see anything that does that right now. I know that there's a lot of talk of CRM stuff and, contact management and how to market to people. And, but everything sort of seems a little bit early, and I'm kind of excited to see where it goes, but there isn't a company that I know of right now in the real estate space that is actually doing that yet. I anticipate that's where it's going to be. And I remember when personal agent websites were first coming out, like everybody claimed that their website was the next best thing. And then 6 months later, it was outdated, right? And people had spent a lot of money investing in their websites and so on and so forth. And then they just continually evolved. And so I just think that right now it's important to educate and understand what AI can do and then see where it goes. And we're continually looking at that as a company. And just out of personal curiosity, I'm trying to stay on top of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So since you have been leaders for a long time, Chris, tell me, what is the biggest leadership lesson that you've learned over your years in business? I'm sure there are a lot of them.
You know what? Yeah, those lessons have come the hard way. I wish they were easy, but I'm glad you asked that question. So a couple top of mind, I would say, is being respected is more important than being liked. And that's kind of a tough one, because real estate people, we're in the business of being liked, as agents. We want people to like us. We want people to do business with us and all those kind of things. And oftentimes it's hard to tell people the tough news. So that was a hard lesson for me to learn. I'm still learning it, and I'm trying to practice that in my communications with people. It's helped to kind of create some mental boundaries around situations, right? I used to instantly kind of throw myself emotionally into the middle of whatever, the current trauma of the hour is. And that's not a sustainable way to go. So that's probably, one of the top ones. Also, the other I would say is asking for help is not a sign of weakness. And that's a tough one too. A lot of us are brought up to think you got to be tough. You need to do things on your own. If you say you need help, so that's a trap as well. And I've had to kind of learn that, if there's something that I need help with, I need to ask people for help. And that does a lot of things, right? That kind of, takes that burden off of me. It actually engages other people and builds trust with the people you're working with. And it gives them an opportunity to actually grow and excel, in the ways where their talents are, right? Because otherwise, you can run all around and try to take care of everything and you're going to get some results, but eventually you're going to crash and burn. And so that's not a good way to go.
Yeah. And Ryan, in business, entrepreneurs have a lot of aha moments. What was your greatest aha moment and what came of it, or what was developed because of it?
Gosh, there's been so many. I think the aha moment for me was, I think the importance of being humble, right? And self-reflective and self-aware, right? I think when I first became a manager and a leader, I thought that I had to make these bold decisions and it was black and white. And I was very sort of, I was just super, super like thinking that I needed to carry the weight of every decision. And I sort of gave myself all this responsibility. And really what I've learned over time is I think leadership is about understanding and empathy and ultimately, like Chris says, making decisions that are based in doing the right thing and not worrying about whether someone's going to like you or not, right? Because ultimately, I think, I'm serving the people that I lead, right? And it's not the other way around. And I think that that's an important thing where as opposed to reacting, and I've always been a very reactionary. As a kid, I was always very reactionary. But as opposed to doing that, then just to be with whatever's going on, gaining perspective and self-awareness, and then trying to make the best decision moving forward. And I think whenever I do that, it's always served me better, right? The end result is more collaborative and I think relationship building, as Chris said. And, I think the people that you're with are the most important thing about leadership, and you always have to keep that at the center. So.
Yeah, as a people pleaser myself, I definitely have struggled with the respect over people liking you. And it's taken me years to really kind of hone that and not be concerned about whether someone likes me or not, and instead be concerned about whether they respect me. So I can definitely see that one. I think is one of those that you work on for a lifetime, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Definitely.
Yeah. So my last question, and this is for both of you, I'm going to start with Chris, but if you could give one piece of advice to brokerage owners who might be struggling with a relationship they're having with a leadership team member, other than going to therapy, what advice do you have for kind of helping them work through that relationship or that idea of friction?
Boy, that's a really interesting question. I mean, I think using some of the lessons that I just mentioned and trying to apply those, right? And, what that does, following those lessons does help to kind of, less emotionally get your mind around the situation, right? Like I cannot emphasize for so many years how I really attached like my personal and emotional well-being on like outcomes. I was so attached to every little outcome that it can make you sick. And so I think, again, the first thing is creating that boundary and, carving some emotional detachment to the outcome. Like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen here, right? I used to catastrophize. I still can. I can do it with the best of them. But to try to avoid going down that path of, well, if I do this and then this happens and this happens, then the whole world, all of a sudden, the whole thing's, blown up, right? I used to do that. And so now I have to say, okay, based on this situation, here's the reality of the situation. Here's what I believe in my healthy space of the lessons I just shared on what needs to happen. And I need to be okay with the outcome of that situation. I can't be so beholden to whatever happens with the outcome that I actually can't make a clear decision and lead. Again, that's tough because everything's not always black and white. But fortunately, if you've had enough experiences that you can draw from and say, well, this situation's not exactly like that one, but there is some correlation to that one, or these set of offices, or, that leadership issue, and you can kind of borrow from those pieces and then apply it. And I just, again, this is an experiment, right? We're all experimenting with these relational dynamics. But for me, I'm actually kind of enjoying, I'm enjoying kind of like, this is my own, myself 2.0, so to speak, in Sereno 2.0. That's my big challenge in all this. Part of the privilege of getting an opportunity to do this is saying, which Chris is showing up in each of these situations based upon my lessons and my past experiences, and how can he best come to solutions and manage and communicate in a way that's going to, be effective and be healthy. And so I know that's a lot to unpack there, but that's really how I'm trying to approach, those kind of situations now.
Okay. Ryan?
Geez, I think what I've learned is that I always, if there's ever tension in a relationship or, maybe a misunderstanding, I think once I gain perspective and self-awareness, the first thing I always ask is, what's my part in it? Right. And I think that so often, especially in professional relationships, if something's not right, they're always looking at what their other person is doing wrong and what they could be doing. And they're not, but then I have to sit back and ask, okay, well, what's my part in it? And is it the fact that I haven't communicated expectations, or I haven't somehow, or I'm carrying my own trip into the whole situation, and that's kind of making the dynamic funky. And I think that was the lesson that Chris and I learned from, talking with the professional is that, like, I realized, like, who wants to work with me, man? Like, Chris has to work with me. He has to put up with me, and I need to kind of manage myself. Like, I can't expect him to change who he is because of me. And I need to kind of participate in the relationship in a way that I have to be self-aware. And I have to be accountable to myself. And by doing so, that allows Chris to kind of flourish and be who he is. And I think oftentimes that's our approach, is that, okay, well, as leaders, what did we not do? And what is our part? And then we can kind of figure out how to get to whatever the solution is. And then, as opposed to living in the problem, we live in the solution. And once we focus on the solution, typically things will work out. Yeah.
That's great. Great advice. Well, Chris and Ryan, thank you so much for joining the RealTrending podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tracey. Yeah, we really appreciate it. This is awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate talking with you.
Thanks.
Take care. Thanks a lot.